Oh, there. Oh, Cameron, while we're waiting, did you check? Did we have anybody sign up as a public speaker tonight? Fancy setting. We'll figure that out in year 4 of this
Yeah,
thing.
go there. Maybe meeting info.
We'll be back in person long before then.
We hope so, Paul.
Like, yeah.
Hopefully sooner than later. Maybe next month.
No, maybe go to
Wouldn't
the
that be
chat
good?
thing.
We got to talk
That
about.
would be good.
We got to talk about that because now I mean most boards are back
No.
as far as I know. I don't know, like some in the region, but anyhow.
The settings.
I guess we're ready to get going here. 7:30 and Papa's out. We pulled it up. Let me just pull up the. All right. Can everyone hear me? I got a new microphone. I know the last meeting I've been having issues with like my microphone, but do I sound good today?
You do. You're much
Good.
clearer.
Bought a fancy mic, open box that is supposed to be for like podcasters. I'm not a podcaster, but I think it works good. Anyhow, okay. All right. Well, let's see. I will officially then call to order the Wednesday, April 20th, 2022 meeting of the City of Falls Church Planning Commission to order. I guess is it Mr. Garris? Can you please call the roll? Or is it Ms. Bazemore? I can't keep track.
Tonight it's Mr. Garris.
All right. Keep me on my toes with that. Okay. Mr. Garris, will you please call the roll?
Wrong mic. All right. Chair Krasner,
I am here.
Vice Chair Stevens,
Here.
Ms. Teets,
Here.
Mr. Pointes,
Here.
Ms. Weiss,
Here.
Ms. Comont,
Here.
Mr. Hyra. I suspect you'll be joining us later.
Okay. That's everybody. Yeah, I think Mr. Hira, as usual, at least until the semester's out. It's probably another few weeks. Not much, though. He should be, I don't know, early May, maybe mid-May. Okay. So we will get going. I will read the required announcement. The meeting for which this agenda has been posted will be held pursuant to and in compliance with the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, Section 2.2-3708.2, and state and local legislation adopted to allow for continued government operation during the COVID-19 declared emergency. All participating members of the Planning Commission will be present at this meeting through electronic means, and all members of the public are welcome to view the meeting at our website, which is www.fallschurchva.gov/PC, and on Falls Church City Television, which is Cox Channel 11, RCN Channel 2, and Verizon Channel 35. Public comments are accepted virtually. Anyone who signed up to speak will do so via this Teams meeting video platform. To speak on a public hearing item or provide general public comment, you would have needed to complete a speaker form at our website, www.fallschurchva.gov/public comment. Ideally, you would have done that before noon today. Following submission of the form, you would have received email instructions on how to join the meeting virtually, and hopefully you received that. Any written public comments are accepted at our email address, which is plan@fallschurchva.gov. Those you can submit in real time until the end of the meeting. They'll be sent to us and summarized here at the meeting. So with that, we'll get going. First order of business is to adopt tonight's agenda. It's a fairly straightforward agenda tonight, luckily, with just essentially our work session item on the area plan, and then our other perfunctory things. So seems logical. There's no discussion. I'll look for a motion to adopt tonight's agenda as printed.
Mr. Chair, I move that we adopt the agenda as posted.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens.
I second.
I have a second by Ms. Teets. Any discussion? If not, then a roll call vote, please, Mr. Garris. Oh,
Sorry.
you-
Mr. Krasner,
Yeah, aye. Yes.
Mr. Stevens,
Yes.
Ms. Teets,
Yes.
Mr. Pointes,
Yes.
Ms. Weiss,
Yes.
Ms. Comont,
Yes.
Mr. Hyra.
Okay, so we will proceed as published. So, no speaker series tonight. Anything received from the public for items not on our agenda, Mr. Garris?
No, they're not.
Okay, so we can check that one off the list. That brings us to our action items. Our only action item tonight is to adopt the meeting minutes from our last meeting, which feels like longer than 2 weeks ago, but I guess that's all it was. The only thing I noticed here that's wrong for me is my name is spelled wrong on the first page, my last name, so just a typo. You could fix that. Otherwise, I don't have any other comments. Does anyone have any comments on the April 6th minutes.
I think there are one or two other typos, but presumably that can be fixed.
Yeah, Mr. Puentes, your hand is up. Go right ahead.
Yeah, there's something missing between lines 57 and 58. Commissioners raised concerns regarding, I think it should be regarding the need for a bike lane along Park Avenue. There's something's missing with that sentence.
What does it say there? 57 and 58. Commissioners raised concerns regarding how bicycle lanes and the public need for a bike lane along Park Avenue. Yeah, something's off there. Yeah, there's like a phrase missing. Maybe a comma if they were like trying to list the things we mentioned. Does anyone recall what we said, what that should be?
I think it was just commissioners raised concerns about the need for a bike lane along Park Avenue.
Period.
Period.
Right. Or comma and lower speed limits, public art and okay. Public art intersections and need for more ambitious green infrastructure. Okay. Very good. Any other comments, edits on that? That was a pretty good summary. Okay, if not, then I'll look for a motion to adopt the minutes as corrected or edited.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we adopt the minutes in the Planning Commission meeting as amended from Wednesday, April 6, 2022.
Great.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Fuentes and Ms. Teets. Any discussion? If not, then a roll call vote.
Chair Krasner,
Yes.
Mr. Stevens,
Yes.
Ms. Teets,
Yes.
Mr. Puentes,
Yes.
Ms. Weiss,
Yes.
Ms. Carmont,
I'll abstain. I missed that meeting.
and Mr. Hyra.
Okay. So those are adopted. We're cruising right along. We're up to our main event of the evening, which is our work session on the East End Small Area Plan. We saw a version of this in a more introductory form back in December, I guess it was. So I know that Ms. Bazemore and the rest of the staff have been hard at work on this, and so we're looking forward to this update on this interesting part of the city. So I guess, Mr. Stott, are you going to introduce the item?
I'll introduce it briefly and then turn it over to Ms. Bazemore for her presentation. So this is, as you said, Chair, this is your second time reviewing the draft content for the small area plan. What you'd seen last time was two of the chapters, Chapter 1, Introduction and Background, and Chapter 2, Concepts. Planning staff heard your direction on those two chapters. We brought those as well as a land use and zoning chapter to council for a recent work session. We heard comments and direction from council. And now what we're bringing back to you is an updated version of those first two chapters you saw, as well as three chapters you haven't seen before: land use and zoning, economic development, and transportation. And of course, bringing these chapters to you in this fashion is part of our iterative drafting process, so that we can get direction early and often to make sure that the overarching vision, the overarching concepts are correct. And then we can work on the functional pieces of the chapter as we go. But that's all I want to do in terms of setup for the item. And now I'll turn it over to Ms. Bazemore, who will walk through the rest of the materials in the report, as well as the content in the draft chapters themselves. Ms. Bazemore?
Hi, thank you for that. It's so nice to be with you all again. Long time no see. So I'm just going to start off with the staff report and walk you all through that. So tonight, the Planning Commission is requested to review and provide feedback on the draft Land Use and Zoning Chapter, Economic Development Chapter, and Transportation Chapter of the East End Small Area Plan. In particular, staff is requesting that the Planning Commission provide input on the following. Are the overarching concepts consistent with the overall vision of the small area plan? Do the proposed strategies and actions deliver on the plan's vision? And are there additional strategies and actions that should be explored? The Planning Commission is also requested to review any revisions to the previously reviewed Introduction and Background chapter, as well as the Concepts chapter of the plan. Moving down to line 23 of the staff report, Updates since the Planning Commission's last review. You guys reviewed the draft materials back on December 1st, 2021 during a work session. You all reviewed and provide comments on both the introduction and background chapters as well as the concepts chapter of the plan. A table summarizing your comments begins on line 39 of the staff report. Some of the comments were around small business preservation in Eden Center, being explicit with our policies to preserve small businesses in Eden Center, strengthening the Eden Center, replacing that word with preservation of Eden Center. That's been incorporated into our concepts. Featuring Vietnamese culture as a centerpiece of this small area plan. That's something that we've continued to do as we move along in the drafting process. There was feedback on getting some park area at the beginning or the front portion of the BJ's parking area. This was reflected in the land use and zoning chapter. You'll see some green space throughout the area, but specifically at the front of BJ's property. There were comments around environmental sustainability. Those, of course, will be provided in the environment and utilities chapter of the small area plan. We've not begun drafting that chapter quite yet. That's our last chapter to draft. Moving on to line 41 of the staff report. This touches on City Council's work session. That was back on March 21st of 2022. So a table summarizing their comments begins on line 45 of the staff report. There are many comments. I encourage you guys to look through that table, but we're going to skip over into the draft chapters portion of the staff report on line 117. Again, we've drafted chapter 1, the introduction and background chapter. We've drafted chapter 2, the concepts chapter. And now we're bringing forward, of course, chapter 3, the land use and zoning chapter, chapter 4, the economic development chapter, and chapter 6, the transportation chapter. I'd like to note that we have chapter 5 and chapter 7 listed. Chapter 5 is urban design, and we're working on that right now. Very exciting. And then, of course, the final chapter is environment and utilities, and that's our final chapter to draft. I'm going to skip over chapter 1 and chapter 2 in the staff report, as you guys have already seen this and the overarching concepts related to chapter 1 and chapter 2. So we're going to move on to line 182 of the staff report, getting into the land use and zoning chapter. So chapter 3 is land use and zoning, and this chapter provides guidance for reinvestment in the East End by suggesting land use and zoning strategies and changes that support the overall vision for the East End, while also documenting existing land use and zoning conditions in the POA. The land use and zoning chapter introduces the concept of nodes within the area to recognize that some areas are more likely to redevelop, while others should have an emphasis on preservation. Beginning on line 191, we see our first node. It's node 0, and that is green spaces and open spaces throughout the POA. A goal of the East End Small Area Plan is to create greener walkable streets and introduce plazas and parks for quality public spaces. Node 0 comprises areas throughout the East End with the intention of creating walkable streets, designating space for these plazas and public areas, incorporating green roofs, allocating space for children to play, and rethinking the existing Oakwood Cemetery as a place or as an opportunity for green space. Moving along to Node 1. This node happens to have the 24-hour fitness site as well as the Coons Ford site. And together they total approximately 10 acres. Redevelopment of the 24-hour fitness site in conjunction with either Coons Ford or adjacent properties in Fairfax County holds the opportunity to create a town center-like development within the East End. The town center would act as a welcoming feature into the area of the city with walkable streets and active street-facing retail that would ultimately invite visitors to spend time shopping, dining, and lingering in this area. This opportunity for reinvestment is significant as it holds the potential to bring residential and or office use into the East End. Node 2 is Eden Center. The Eden Center is, of course, a cultural anchor for the Vietnamese American community, and it comprises Node 2. The vision for this area is to preserve core existing structures while enhancing the surrounding environment. The opportunity to construct structured parking should be explored in the Eden Center area, as well as the creation of permanent ground level spaces for events and programming. And finally, our last node is node 3, and this is east of Roosevelt. So the land area east of Roosevelt Boulevard comprises this node. Within this area at the east end, there's opportunity to consolidate properties, and potential limited redevelopment of the BJ's parking lot would allow for a new redevelopment along Wilson. This redevelopment could complement the potential mixed-use development, again, in nearby Node 1 with the redevelopment of 24-hour fitness and Coons. Given the existing character of this particular area, it's one that caters towards dining and food shopping. So we see Node 3 as an area where a potential indoor-outdoor food hall and market could really thrive. Moving on to Chapter 4, this is our Economic Development chapter. The Economic Development chapter begins by detailing existing commercial uses and providing an employment profile, reviewing the history of Eden Center in relation to economic development, and finally documenting recent reinvestments as well as land values, property taxes, and business taxes. This chapter includes the following overarching strategies for economic development. First is to preserve and expand existing economy and culture, and second is to expand the POA's market share. Something that's interesting to note about this chapter is that it provides case studies throughout to better explain the recommended strategies for precedent. And finally, our last chapter is Chapter 6. This is our transportation chapter. The transportation chapter catalogs existing transportation conditions and as well as already planned investments such as the Fairfax County Ring Road and the future BRT line being studied by the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission in the area. The chapter recommends future investments that would deliver on the goals of this plan to reframe the East End as one that's a vibrant, multimodal, and accessible area. Actions and strategies captured in the transportation chapter include the following themes: a grid of streets and greener paths, pedestrian connectivity and safety, cycling infrastructure and parking, and finally transit investments. Moving on to line 257 of the staff report, this captures our timing for the plan. It's going to look a little different than the last time you guys saw it, so I just want to lean into this really quick. The target month for action of this small area plan is now November 2022. To meet that deadline, staff is working with the following schedule as noted below. Recently, we went to council for their first work session on this item, and again, that was back on March 21st. We're here with you again on April 20th for another work session, and our second work session with council right now is slated for May or June of 2022. Just want to lean into some of the community engagement strategies that we have listed within the report. We have an idea of doing pop-up meetings just to really get on the ground and engage with the community in the POA. So we're looking at Eden Center for these pop-ups. We're looking at residential buildings nearby, such as Falls Green or the Madison. We also are looking at the farmers market. That was a suggestion brought from council, and I think it's a really good idea. So we're going to explore that as well. We have another community meeting slated kind of early fall, specifically September of 2022. And we anticipate coming to you guys for an action in November 2022 before, of course, going to City Council for action. That's all for my presentation tonight, and we're looking forward to your comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bazemore. Yeah, first off, excellent job on the draft. It's great to see it progress. Again, this is in some ways a more challenging part of town. I think some of our other areas, we've kind of, thought about, and like the mold for what we want to see along Broad Street is kind of makes it a little easier. This part of town is more complicated. There's more going on here. It's so different than the rest of the city. But good job on tackling, these issues. So I guess with that, we'll open it up to commissioners, if anyone wants to provide some feedback or comments, or if there's any questions. Mr. Stevens' hand has popped up. Go right ahead.
Okay, well, I have comments and a few questions. And I'll apologize in advance. I kind of have these written out on pages, and I don't know that I necessarily will ask these in logical order, but I'll try to do my best. First, couple of comments had to do with the staff report. First of all, thank you, Ms. Basemore, for going through all of that. That was very helpful. On line 93 of the staff report, it talks about environmental sustainability. The only things that are mentioned there are stormwater quality and tree canopy. And since this is really, the context here is of the city's overall vision and redevelopment, and since most of our greenhouse gas emissions come from either buildings or transportation, it strikes me that that is a key issue that should be included in environmental sustainability. I realize you're just kind of summarizing here, but most of my comments here this evening are either going to be about greenhouse gas emissions or on improving bike safety. Then I had a question on the timetable that you referenced at the end of the staff report. Talks about line 266, the second work session with City Council, and that all chapters would be reviewed. Does that mean that the two chapters that we haven't seen yet, the urban design and environment, will City Council be seeing those in that session?
Yes, that's correct.
So they will see it before we do?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, I'll just say that may not be ideal, but thanks for clarifying that. Question on street names. Do we know on all of the key roads just who the people are that they're named after? You know, for example, Wilson. Is that Woodrow Wilson or Roosevelt? Is that FDR? The reason I ask it, you know, some comments I've heard have not viewed changing the name of Wilson Boulevard favorably. But I think if they knew it was Woodrow Wilson, that might make it a little bit easier to see the value of a potential name change. But in any event, it strikes me in the history part of this small area plan that clarifying who the names of some of these key roads are really named after might be helpful. Let's see, on line 155, this is the vision for the East End. Again, this doesn't include anything on the need to address climate change by reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And the thought that occurs to me that is, as buildings redevelop and as transportation plans get implemented, it really is the key time to do these things with the view of reducing greenhouse gas emissions in mind. And if it's not in the overall vision, then I'm not sure that people that would be using this plan to develop their plans would necessarily know that that is indeed something that's important for the city. Okay, on the concept chapter, I know we've reviewed that in the past. But on page 2-4, you don't have to go to it. I'll just describe my point here, I think. The concept chapter, page 2-4, it has an illustration showing the Fairfax County Ring Road connecting through to Route 7 rather than Hillwood. And this is kind of a general question, I guess. Didn't we have a preference for the Ring Road terminating at Route 50 and Hillwood as opposed to going through all the way as a high speed or a higher speed road emptying onto Broad Street?
That's correct. That graphic needs to be switched out to reflect that change. Thank you.
Okay, very good, because that's helpful for me. There's other illustrations that show something called like a slow speed road after Hillwood, and that made sense, but this one didn't. Let's see. Yeah, again, on chapter 2, which is the concepts, I think it's important to have a key concept in there, the need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I don't think that's in there now. And likewise, to state our preference for redevelopment with buildings that are energy efficient and use renewable energy where possible. And again, if these things aren't in the plan, then I don't think they're going to get highlighted. Then let me go to the individual chapters. I don't have many comments on chapter 3. That's the land use and zoning. But I was surprised there was no page numbers on that, so it kind of made it difficult to know how to comment. It strikes me, and I'm picking up on a comment from Commissioner Weiss from the last meeting, that some of these things potentially just could be in chapter 4 of the comp plan. You know, they're kind of basic boilerplate sort of things. So if you were looking for an opportunity to reduce the overall size of this small area plan, some of those things in this chapter might present that opportunity. Also, on the proposed land use illustration in this chapter, I couldn't really read the legend colors. They don't seem to correspond to things that I can pick up on that. So maybe that's just me or my computer software, but if anybody else had that same issue, I suppose that would be good feedback to share with you so that we can get an illustration there that's easy to follow. Then on chapter 4, the economic development, page 4-8 discusses a structured parking facility. And my question there is that who would do that? Is that something that's being proposed that the city implement a structured parking garage, or just generally kind of hoping that developers would put this in?
That's the latter.
Okay, you might want to clarify that, because when I read it, I wasn't sure if this was something the city was contemplating, in which case I would have a problem with that. But yeah, if you could clarify that, I think that would help.
I think just to jump in on that one quickly, I think the idea of structured parking, certainly you can see that in a lot of the city's design guidelines from an aesthetic standpoint, trying to move parking into some sort of structured parking garage. I think for this area in particular, I think structured parking would be a way of freeing up some of the space that's currently used for surface parking while preserving some of the existing buildings. So one of the challenges with underground parking is that it is often accompanied by total redevelopment or total tear down of a site. So I think it was trying to open that conversation that, say, some sort of above ground garage, maybe it's in the back of the site, is a way that you could provide sort of a replacement parking supply while freeing up the remainder of the site to be turned to a more dynamic use. Now, to your point of who pays for that, no, I don't think the expectation is that the city local funds would pay for it, but putting it in the plan would make it eligible to go chase after grant dollars, whether they're transportation dollars, economic development dollars, I don't know. But I think the idea is just sort of putting it out there as a marker of something that might be helpful to the area. Yeah,
it just strikes me that it's somewhat counterintuitive or counterproductive, maybe that's a better word. If we're trying to get people out of cars, we don't spend a lot of city money on building expensive structured parking garages. But anyway, that's kind of how I view that. If you're saying that if a private developer would want to do such a thing, that the city would be receptive as part of the the valuation process, that I guess that's okay. Or at least it's not ideal, but it's better than having the city spend its own money to pursue a structure that doesn't really seem to go in line with our overall goals. Then turning to section 6, the transportation chapter, and this might be easier to actually go to it because I've got about a dozen or so comments here. On page 6.2, It shows a protected bike lane there, which is very good. Appreciate you including that. And in fact, I think it would help overall if we could give that topic of protected bike lanes more emphasis in this chapter. It's kind of mentioned in a couple of places, but it doesn't seem to be cohesive throughout the chapter, so I'll share that comment. I notice in the Fairfax County in the Ring Road that they do have, a very nice illustration that shows a protected bike lane. And I think later in this chapter, we do indicate interest in having a protected bike lane along Roosevelt in the city. But I think to the degree that we can show other places within the city's geography, opportunities for protected bike lanes that could tie into each other, that especially tying into the Fairfax County and perhaps even Arlington protected bike lanes, that you could actually have a very nice system of protected bike lanes in the whole Seven Corners area. Page 6-3 talks about mode share, and I'm wondering if what we're really interested here is mode capture. In other words, rather than just sharing it with cars and other modes, that what we'd really like to see is the share for cars to decline and the share for walking and bicycling and transit use to go up. So in that sense, it's actually mode capture rather than mode share. Page 6-8 is another ring road illustration. Yeah, that's another one that shows, I think that shows it going into Broad Street. So you might want to see if that's the one that you really want to use. On page 610, it shows that concept of a proposed low-speed shared streets, which I think is good. The only thing that caught my attention there is it shows one of these low-speed shared streets going through the Eden Center. I'm just wondering if they were aware of that in the plan, and if they were, what they thought about that. Page 611 shows a very nice protected bike lane, but it's got a pedestrian in it. That strikes me as maybe not what you want to show. Page 612, in a couple of places, it mentions a raised bike lane, and I think what you might be saying is a bike lane without a curb next to it. Is that, in other words, instead of it dropping down with a curb, that it would actually be at grade level? Is that what that's in reference to?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Then my only I think that's fine. I get that. The only thing I would add is to utilize the term protected bike lane as much as possible. And you do show, some nice pictorials of protected bike lanes, but that's really the gold standard, I think, for making sure that people feel safe and therefore will want to get out and use the bikes. Page 614.
Somebody working outside?
Page 614, it talks about rededicate space. Let's see where that. Oh yeah, rededicate gain space to bicycle lanes and sidewalk. That's the second from the last strategy. Yeah, let's see what my comment was there. Maybe here again, you could use the term protected bike lane, which is what the illustration shows there, and that's a very good photo. Page 615, coming down the home stretch here. Again, it talks about a raised cycle track. I might suggest if you want to keep the raised part, but then to add a protected bicycle lane as the preferred design feature. And then a little bit further down on that page, it talks about putting in bicycle racks consistent with the streetscape standards. But then it shows a picture there of one of the green city branded, I don't think, unless I'm wrong, I don't think that is what is in our standards at this point. I mean, it's a branding tool, that's great, but is that what we mean by the type of bike racks that we want?
You know, that was my image that I dropped in, so I'll need to cross-check on that. But thank you for bringing it up.
Okay. I mean, I like those, but they're hard to use. I don't know. I'm sure anyone who's tried to hook up their bike to one of those, it's not very easy. Just a couple more. Let's see, that comment I've already made. The last one, it's on 6-20. And right at the end there, it talks about charging stations. And I just wanted to share, I've gotten some feedback here recently from people that have Teslas and drive EVs and like to use the DC fast charger that's up at Eden Center. It's the only one that we have in the city. And they were telling me about how recently they've tried to use it. And there's been electric vehicles lined up, you know, over 5 or 6 cars lined up to use those. So apparently they're extremely popular right now. So you might want to put something in there about the need to expand the number of not only just charging stations in general, but the DC fast chargers. Those are the ones that you know will charge your car in about 20 minutes, and they're very good for retail situation. And people can charge their car while they go in and do some short-term shopping. So I think that's all I had. Sorry for rambling on here a bit, but I think we're making good progress. So thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Those were some very comprehensive list of comments. Okay. Does anyone else want to jump in, provide any feedback? Not seeing anybody. I mean, I could jump in. I usually go at the end, but I don't have to go at the end. You know, I guess I focused more on some of the land use recommendations. I figured that was what I guess stood out most to me. Some things I want to make sure that we're kind of, you know, thinking hard about, because really, what is a comprehensive plan? I mean, some of the, you know, the language in there is, along with the transportation stuff, is probably some of the most critical parts of it. So like in Node 1, I was curious about, I mean, you have that like on page, well, yeah, and obviously I'm sure there was an oversight, but not having page numbers is obviously a problem. I'm sure there was just an oversight, so I'm sure you'll add page numbers. But so on Node 1, which is page like 11 of the PDF document, I think, or something like that. So yeah, you have the note about this policy guidance is not formal guidance for Fairfax County, rather is suggested. I mean, I think, have we looked at what the Fairfax County plan says for those parcels? I mean, I think you may have already done this, but you should look at what they say, and to the extent what we're looking to do is consistent or not. I mean, I think we should say that. I mean, if the Fairfax County comprehensive plan, you know, as part of the 7 Corners study, is recommending something other than that, I think it is recommending some. I think it doesn't allow and encourage for redevelopment of like the bank towers, and which have already, you know, had seen some redevelopment. But I think we should identify that because you know the area is so integrated, you know, in that area. And I agree with the idea about creating like a node of activity that might span the jurisdictions. But you know, Fairfax County is recommending something completely different. I mean, we need to be realistic and upfront about that. So while we can't plan for them, we can certainly just identify to the extent their plan is consistent with our goal for the area or not. I know we have been in contact with those folks and we've been working with them, but so I don't know if we need a note to say that, like, to apologize for anything. I think we just need to talk about what we want to do and then talk about whether or not it's consistent with our neighbor or not. And how can we try to be more consistent and work together. So I don't think the visions are actually, luckily, are not, they're not diametrically opposed or anything like that. But we should I don't think we need like a note like that. That's just my opinion. For note 2 for Eden Center, one thing, first of all, not to disagree with Mr. Stevens, but parking is a problem there. Eden Center is a great place, as everybody knows, but if you go there at peak times, it's chaotic and parking is extremely tight. It's a little chaotic. They've taken up some spots during COVID for like outdoor seating and stuff, which is great, but it's a little chaotic in there. And I think that's an impediment to attracting more visitors and getting more people to come. I personally know of folks who sometimes are hesitant to go to Eden Center during busy times because they're like, oh, you can't park. And they feel that it's just like, it's a difficult place to visit. And we obviously want to encourage people to visit. And so I agree with that part of the plan, and so I think that's something that does need to be given the obviously we want to encourage other modes, but we have to acknowledge the fact that Seven Corners, even though the long range vision is to make it much more walkable, and it certainly needs that. Having adequate space for folks that will help those businesses succeed and thrive in the future as well. I also think, and I think you may have already touched on this, and I apologize if this is like hit on somewhere else in the plan. The whole idea of identifying that Eden Center is actually part of the City of Falls Church, there are many folks I think who don't even realize that, because again, this whole part of town looks so different from the rest of the city. I know we have some signage, and I don't know if the new EDA, is there new EDA like welcome signage on Wilson? I haven't just been over there recently to see if they installed any there, but
there's a lot of signs down here that point you to Eden Center, like one off of Route 7, one off of Roosevelt.
Yeah.
But I don't know if there's one on Wilson.
Yeah, I think like when you're entering the city, I know there might have been like one of the older like Welcome to Falls Church signs. So some people know, but I think to the extent, again, as part of the plan, we're looking to bring that part of town and Eden Center specifically, into the city, or not into the city, but to bring like to raise its profile as a key part of our community. I think that's really important. Because a lot of people, I think it's in Fairfax County or Arlington, or they just don't realize it's in the City of Falls Church. Some people are surprised when they hear that. And we want to be proud of it. It is a unique asset. It attracts people from not just Northern Virginia, from the whole region and beyond. Just a weird aside, I was watching some weird, I was watching like something like a video of somebody who was like traveling from like all the way from like New York or something to come to Eden Center just because he wanted to like practice his Vietnamese language skills before he moved to Vietnam. I just thought that was really cool that he came, people traveled hundreds of miles to go there. So it's a really cool asset. It's a cool part of our community, and we want to make sure that everyone knows that it is part of the City of Falls Church. In Node 3, one thing I was curious about was the recommendation to adaptively reuse BJ's. BJ's is a successful business. I don't think they have any plans to go anywhere anytime soon, but it's a big box store. I know there are lots of big box stores throughout the country where they've gone out of business. People have reused them for a number of uses, but the real estate and the land is so valuable and probably could be put. I know you talk about like filling in the parking lot, but normally adaptive reuse is we'd want to see that in a space that either we feel can't be redeveloped, or the market's not going to redevelop it, or that it's historically significant. I don't think BJ's as a structure is that important that we would really be upset if somebody tore it down to do something in line with what the future vision is in the future. And so I think we want to be careful about recommending that it be adaptively reused unless we really want to save BJ's, in the future. I don't know if that's what we really want. If it is, we should talk about it, but we just need to be clear about that. And so, yeah, that was kind of my main sort of overview. I think, again, the land use recommendations are where the rubber meets the road in a comp plan. And so we need to just be careful about the language in here, and that we're very, on the one hand, the comp plan is a guide and it's somewhat general, but it's also, developers will definitely key off of the language and the recommendations in here very carefully. And so we need to be, in some ways precise about what we want and what we don't want. And so, yeah, so those are kind of my my main comments overall on that. But overall, again, good work, and you've made good progress. But yeah, it's definitely a tricky part of town to try to figure out, how to encourage the right type of redevelopment without displacement. I mean, there's a lot going on here. The Seven Corners area, I mean, you see what Fairfax went through. It's been many, many years running, that Seven Corners study, and some of that's because the area is tricky, between the transportation challenges and the older land uses. I mean, it's been a tricky part of the whole region. And that's part of the reason why I think it's sort of lagged a little bit as far as seeing like new investment. I mean, there's been some rehabilitation and some other things, and a few new things, a few bright spots, but I think that's part of it. So the transportation piece is key, but I think Mr. Stevens hit on a lot of good recommendations there. So anyhow, that was kind of my takeaway. And there were a couple of little things I could like send that to you separately, like some wording things and like some little just wordsmithing stuff. We don't need to go through that here, but I'll try to send you those, separately in an email or something. But anyway, Ms. Teets, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, thank you. It's funny. I was going to bring up the parking garage or parking deck, and I had a different take on it. I just felt like, why would we want to build another deck where hopefully we're not going to have as many people having to drive to places? But I think one thing I would say too about Eden Center that people may not be aware of is there's a ton of parking behind the building. And most of the time, even on Saturday where it's busiest, I go behind the building and I can find parking if I want to park. I usually walk there, but I walk through the back sometimes, and it's pretty empty. And so one of the things that Eden Center could do is better signage about the additional parking in the back, and that would help. And I also think, I would rather see money put to a shuttle to the metro, because it is walkable to the metro, but not maybe for older people. I just think it's so close to the metro, but it's not really within that 15-minute walking for certain people. So that was just one of the things I wanted to. It's funny. One of my notes was I was hoping in the future we wouldn't have to build too many more parking decks. I'd like to see us try other stuff. I have a few things in the land use, real quick, just that in the existing land use chart, I think there's just a typo in that right of way is on there twice as a line. I think that was a mistake. And further in on the existing land use map itself, you guys have BJ's as light industry, and I thought, wouldn't that really actually be individual retail, perhaps? This is the one that doesn't have the number in. And so it's slide 3 out of land use. Yeah, that one. So I just thought that BJ's probably should be listed as retail, since it's basically a giant grocery store. And the other thing I wanted to know on this map is there's this little tiny yellow sliver next to Fort Taylor Park, which on here seems to be single family. So is there a teeny tiny bit of single family zoning next to the park?
Let's see. I cannot speak to that. I'm not sure. Right next to Fort Taylor Park. Is it, Cameron, can you hover over that yellow line?
Yeah, I wasn't sure what that was.
Yeah, is that?
Yeah. No, I'm just noticing it now too. I'm not sure. I would have to follow up on it.
Okay, it's just a little oddity, and like I said, on the BJ's, I just think it's inappropriate, because it used to be a plumbing supply store, so maybe at that point it was light industry, but now I think it's more retail because it's like a grocery store.
Just making a plug for updated GIS. My guess is that the GIS layer hasn't been updated since the BJ's was constructed.
Yeah, probably. It's probably still there as when it was plumbing equipment. But anyway, I think we need to recognize that because it's a retail location that actually brings in quite a bit of revenue for us. So it's good to remember it's there. But the thing I also wanted to point out is, and I didn't see anything referenced in here, but the front parking lot of BJ's. So there's a lot of parking at BJ's. but the front section, there's like kind of a divider in there where like a third of the front is kind of separated by a drive lane. It is not used. The only one parking in that front are like people who live across the street who are, I guess, assuming they might not get towed. So I really think that one of the things I'd love to see in this plan is that we work with BJ's to maybe take that front part of the parking lot and turn that into a park, because it is, I mein, no one's parking there, and it's too far away for people to park and walk the Eden Center naturally. But that's another thought I had is there a shared parking? If we're not going to turn it into a park, could we possibly make it alternative parking for Eden Center? It's probably like 2 blocks along Wilson, and then you kind of have to a half block to get into the shopping center. So for most people, it wouldn't be a long walk. But of course, on the Plan Commission, we have heard people say that a half block walk is too long. So you just don't know. Like people want to be parked in front of where they're going to be. So one, either shared parking with Eden Center, or 2, make it into a park, because it's just not used. And we live on that end of town, and we pass it a lot, and we actually go to BJ's to get stuff for Gordon's business. And it's like, I've never seen, the only people, really, literally, the only people parking there are parking there outside of BJ's and just walking over to their apartments. And then my other big thing is on the economic development, 4.4-4, where we had economic development strategies. So, for number 1, that preserve and expand existing economy and culture, I really like that goal. I mean, I think we really do want to preserve and expand the economy and culture. But, I just really wonder if some of the strategies here are actually going to do anything. Because the first one, go back. It's like 4.4 is where I'm at. There we go. Yeah, so no time it doesn't seem like any of our reductions, we've done reductions for other things. There's like reductions in taxes if you update an old building. There's some reductions for like there's one thing, like if you plant more trees, you get a reduction and some kind of tax or something. But anyway, in general, I've never seen many people use these reductions. I think that it just doesn't seem to incentivize anyone to do anything. I just wonder if we could do, I almost feel like rather than say this is what we're going to do, maybe we could like put in here that we'll do a study to try to figure out what kind of reduction of fees or taxes would actually generate the kind of, the changes we want. But I don't think 1.1 is, I don't think it's really going to do much. So I kind of discount that one. And then if you go down, the next one is invest in infrastructure improvements through voluntary concession. Now, we do that all the time, and it does work really well. But we're not really talking about doing much big development here. We're talking about keeping Eden Center. Maybe there's some development on the Eden Center lot, but then, that's a possibility down the future. But we really aren't. And we all know with voluntary concessions, it's a give and take. So the developer has whatever money they decide they're going to give us for voluntary concessions. And if we take a lot of it, for arts and culture, then we lose it for parks, or we lose it for environmental stuff, or we want more. I mean, in the end, it's just kind of, I think that's something that's going to happen anyway. Whenever there's any kind of development that has to go through, first and second read-in and, all that kind of stuff. So I don't think it's like really strong. I like the limit displacement to preserve small business. That's there too. And I think if there's any way to use special exception criteria to make that happen, I think that's really smart. And I thought that build economic resilience is a nice idea, but again, I just don't think it's functionally going to work. I did think that the second set of strategies, the food programming, I think that's really a great thought. The regional marketing plan, I actually think those are really more proactive things, and I actually might even put those as number 1 rather than number 2, because I think they're stronger. I think there's things that we could do proactively. It wouldn't take getting someone else to do it with us to have it happen. And And then it looks like there's like a formatting error here, and where 2.3 repurpose infill utilized parking lots is shifted over. And obviously I agree with that. Like I was talking about with the BJs, they have parking that's just not being used. And 24 Fitness is kind of different. Their parking is pretty full, so I don't know how much they would be willing to partner with us. But I definitely could see some kind of development there that could include the 24 Fitness, like in a newer building, because that's a pretty old building. But anyway, so that's just the stuff I just wanted to talk about. You know, like I just really felt that the number one set, a lot of it is kind of not strong. I thought the number two set of things that we could do, strategies, the number two strategies were much stronger and more likely to actually happen and be able to help the area. And I did think that 2.4 incorporate complementary retail makes a lot of sense too. Although, you know, Eden Center's like, it's a lot bigger than people think because there's a lot of shops inside that aren't visible. And there's also some in the sub basement. There's some businesses. I don't know if people realize how much stuff is there. And I'm not sure, again, that's that whole thing with right now, the parking's kind of crazy. So can you build more structures there? I don't know. So that's something to think about too. But I think that, oh, it's jammed now. I think that's all I have for economic development. I was just looking. Yeah, so that's it for economic development. And those were like my big comments. So I'll let someone else comment more because I think Mr. Stevens covered a lot of the environmental stuff that I was thinking about. Thanks.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Ms. Teets. I think Mr. Hira was next. Your hand is up. Go right ahead.
Most of those comments were great. I think I'm going to pair with some of them in that you mentioned that a lot of the strategies you didn't think had much teeth to really prevent small business displacement. And I'm on a national anti-small business displacement network. It's out of the University of Maryland. They have a toolkit that's on their website that goes through all of the strategies around the country to prevent small business displacement. And I highly recommend, Paul, your staff look at their report and come up with some innovative ideas. I think we have an opportunity here to really try unique strategies. I mean, of course, there are economic constraints on what we can do. We'd be working with a developer or the landowner. But at the same time, I think there are some city resources, or if not city resources that we can bring to bear in the region that could help the small businesses when redevelopment and revitalization comes. And I think there's a lot of language about cultural preservation, which is great, but I've studied a lot of neighborhoods that are historic culturally, and there are a lot of symbols around that prior culture that get instituted, but then the people and the small businesses get displaced. I mean, the Shaw U Street is the area in Washington, D.C. It was the Black mainstay. It was the Harlem of D.C. I wrote a book about this area, and you can't walk through the area without understanding the Black history that's associated with it, because there are murals, there are signs, there's a walking tour. So the knowledge of the culture has been preserved, but yet the people haven't. Most of the small Black-owned businesses are gone. The population is now majority white in an area that used to be majority African American. And I'm just saying that just utilizing the language of cultural preservation, well, a developer is going to come in and put up a mural, and then all the small Asian businesses will be gone. So we want to prevent that from happening, and to do that, we need tangible policies, probably with resources that can help the small businesses stay in place as this redevelopment takes place. And so we don't really have that in this plan, and that needs to be inserted. All right, so that's on the small business side. The other part of the plan is that I'm concerned with is the housing. There aren't that many housing opportunities, but there are some affordable housing opportunities. I think the in the concept and the visioning. There's a lot of talk about housing and creating housing opportunities for diverse income population and stuff like that. But we need to say affordable housing a little more. It's there, but it's once. But if you read the whole thing, affordable housing doesn't jump off the page. It's almost buried in this report and in the visioning. And if you read the comments, I think there are some comments from the public about affordability. So I think we need to talk about preserving affordable housing and increasing the affordable housing stock as we are doing market rate development. And maybe using the term mixed income. I didn't see the term mixed income mentioned anywhere. And I would maybe insert that somewhere so that it signals that we want to bring a higher and more housing opportunities, but at the same time, we want that to be paired with increasing the amount of affordable opportunities and preserving the affordable opportunities that are there as well. So again, I would think that what we need to have is more strategies on preserving and building affordable housing, and we also need more language in there like mixed income, that's what we're trying to do, so that it signals to the development community that the type of development we really want. And again, when I look at all the pictures, it just looks like it's great. I mean, it's upgrading, it's making it more vibrant, and we want economic development there. But I think we also need to signal that we want mixed income, we want to preserve the affordable housing stock, and also increase it at the same time. So I think we should beef up on the affordable housing strategies in this plan, as well as the preservation of the existing small businesses. But other than that, I think it's great. I just think, and again, I know this is a work in progress. So, we can always improve on it. And I hope my suggestions have given some ideas about ways we can assert tangible policy options, and also maybe incorporate the idea of mixed income a little bit more in the overall plan. So that's it. That's all. Those are all my comments. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Yes, I see. Ms. Coleman's hand is up. Go ahead.
Thanks. Just a few comments. Thanks, Emily and Paul and everybody for all the hard work on this. It's really come a long way. It's so cool. What really struck me looking at this is just how huge this area is. I mean, if you think even about the size of node 1 or 2, I can't remember, 3, sorry, the Coons and 24-Hour Fitness, if that's 10 acres, I mean, that's the size of the development, the big development that we're putting in up at West Falls, right? So it's a lot of room here, but yeah, it's complicated because there's so many roads. So to me, I feel like, having really comfortable sidewalk spaces, comfortable bike riding spaces, and very safe crossings, and really good connections to whatever Fairfax County is going to do at the adjacent Seven Corners shopping mall area. I feel like that's really important. I think you have a lot of that in here. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the idea of the slow speed roads. I like the idea. I was just curious, how you were envisioning that.
Yeah, the slow speed roads along Fullwood area.
There were a number of them, I think, there were 3 or so, right? In the map.
Oh yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. The Making Connections map. Cameron, actually, do you want to speak to this? Cameron made the graphic and the map, so he is definitely the expert here.
Sure, let me pull up
610.
on transportation. Okay, there we go. Yeah, the idea of trying to create, what we basically want to do is part of the goal for urban design and transportation is to simplify a very messy street grid, which is now there at Seven Corners. And part of that reasoning was to try to create, I know we talked about, Mr. Stevens, you mentioned the internal road that was coming there, the Eden Center property, and going across. The intention there is to, one, work with what we have in existing roads, work with the proposed ring road, and then also to create an internal street network of slower roads that are more mode share focused, as a way for pedestrians and cyclists to navigate this area, which is very car dominated at the moment. So that was kind of the vision of this internal streetscape network, which kind of links together these parcels, which are very isolated right now at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. That it can be intimidating. I mean, parking, even driving in that area can be intimidating, but as a pedestrian or cyclist, it's really kind of very unwelcoming right now. So I think we really need something like that to achieve the shorter blocks and the slower speeds that will actually make it a comfortable place to walk. So I definitely would support that idea. I wanted to mention in the just might jump around a little bit, but in the land use and zoning chapter on the first page, the totals of the percentages weren't adding up for me, and I think that the total for the existing land use for shopping centers and individual retail should be more like 27 acres or about 62%. I think you have it at a lower percentage. So I just wanted to point that out. And then can you just confirm the small parcel that is referred to that's north of the Seven Corners intersection that is part of Fairfax County that you say the city should work with Fairfax County to adjust the boundary line? Is that parcel where roughly where like the Lost Dog
Yes.
rescue is located?
Yes, there's a dentist's office, I believe, there right now.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Thank you. I just wanted to confirm. Let's see. I very much agree that, we have the impervious surface area is a total of 78% is impervious throughout the East End. I think almost like 80% of that probably is just parking lots and roads. And so, yeah, I very much support the idea of a higher use for parking, but I also acknowledge that parking is a difficulty right now. If we need to, build a garage as a hopefully temporary, maybe not so temporary, I don't know, but a bridge to a more multimodal future, hopefully. I think I like your recommendation of putting it in the rear, where Melissa mentioned the parking is available and not very well used at this time. So that seems like a good idea if the developer or the landowner wants to do it. And then I just want to say I really love the idea of the pop-up meetings. I like us bringing the plans to the people rather than asking the people to abandon whatever they're doing and come to us. Even if those meetings are in convenient public places, I think it's nice to really go to the place that you're talking about. So I think that's really smart. And I also love the idea, I'm very much skipping around, I'm sorry, but the idea of a food market in Node 3, I think that would be a really great complementary use for the Eden Center and really bring some more vitality to that area. So I think that's it. I second all of Mr. Stevens' great comments about transportation issues, and I think that's it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Is there anyone else who wanted to provide any feedback? Not seeing any other hands. So if not, then I guess. So what are the next steps? I guess either Mr. Stoddard or Ms. Bazemore. I know you kind of had the timeline. Oh, wait, Ms. Weiss, I'm sorry. Did I miss your hand? If I did, I apologize.
Yeah, no. I just put it up. I'm sorry. I guess just a question. And I just thank all the other commissioners for their Excellent comments, as always. For those pop-up meetings, is the intention to have Vietnamese language resources available?
Yes, that's something that we plan to do moving forward. That, and then we've also received some comments from the public asking if we'll have Spanish translation on site. So I think we're considering that as well.
Okay, I think that would be terrific. Thank you.
Okay, so you're going back to the city council. That's
Yeah.
yeah.
So we'll go back to city council in either late May or June, and that the intention there is to have all chapters drafted so they can review. But I did note that Mr. Stevens was curious about us possibly coming to you guys before we go back to council, so I might talk to Paul about doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think in some ways there's some logic in that. I mean, I think, again, it gets back to the whole nature of how sometimes these things ping pong back and forth between us and council. There's some logic to, since we make a recommendation to council, ultimately is trying to, work more in that type of order, to try to deal with some of the comments that we've raised. It might make it easier once you get to council. I know sometimes though, council comes up with things completely different. Although I looked at their comments from, the work session they already had, and in general, it was not completely different from what we had to say. So sometimes you can't predict what they're going to come up with, but I think there is some logic to trying to resolve some of that first, with us. If there's time in the schedule, I mean, I can talk to Mr. Stoddard about that offline, but I guess it's been a while since we've done an area plan, at least in the last few months. And I know we've talked with our land use applications about trying to tinker with the order of things just a little bit to try to, have things build up more organically, kind of, from the planning commission and work its way to council for a final approval as opposed to ping-ponging back and forth. But some of that's just the nature of the process here in town. But so yeah, I mean, I would support that, from my point of view, if there's time in the schedule and it doesn't completely, upset the apple cart with staff schedule. I think there's some logic to that. But Mr. Stevens, I'm sorry, I was.
Yeah, just to piggyback on your comment, all that I think would be appropriate is just the two chapters that we haven't seen, the urban design and the environment, as opposed to having to go through everything again, which might be a little bit of a burden for staff.
Sure, right, okay, I'm sorry, and that's what you mentioned the first time, right? You asked the question and I kind of caught the tail end of the answer, but not the beginning of your question, so that was what it was. So you're going to bring all of that to council. We haven't seen it yet. I would agree then, yeah, I apologize. With what Mr. Stevens said, I mean, I think there's certainly a benefit to giving us the opportunity to comment on the entire plan before it goes back to council. But yeah, if the schedule allows for it, it sounds like it may allow for it. So if it does, then I think that would be, I would certainly support adding it to one of our other meetings before you go back to the city council.
Yeah, that sounds like something we could do.
I'll just chime in and say that is consistent with the way the city has handled small area planning in the past, that going all the way back to the North Washington plan, that the Planning Commission really has been the primary champion of the small area planning process. Right, and obviously the detailed comments that staff benefits from when we go to the Planning Commission is obviously helpful. So I think your idea of taking all the chapters to the Planning Commission, getting that not only a first cut but a detailed cut before to go to the council serves the planning process well. Great. Well, then we'll look forward to seeing it again in the next month or so. Great. Okay. Well, if there's nothing else on that item, we'll move on. We don't have too much else on tonight's agenda for a change. I guess the next item is right to the director's report. Is that right, Mr. Stoddard? Sure, happy to walk through that. Thank you, Chair, and members of the commission. Let's see, let me make sure I'm looking at the right thing as I try to manage my browser tabs. Let's see, so a couple things. I apologize, Paul. I just realized I skipped over Planning Commission's report. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't have it in front of me, and I was going from memory, and I forgot that I skipped over that. So I don't want to cut you off, but I also didn't want to. Why don't we do Planning Commission's reports? We'll follow it in order. I had skipped over that in my mind.
So before we get to Mr. Steiner, I apologize for cutting him off. Are there any planning commission reports from the last couple of weeks? I know it was a spring break week for some of us, so I don't know if the people had too many other meetings they attended or things they want to announce, but there may be something. So does anybody have any planning commissioners reports?
I have a quick one just because I meant to mention it earlier. I thought it was intriguing that on May 1st, our police department is actually going to be at Eden Center. They're having a drop-in bubble tea with the cops event from like 11:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. So if you want to talk to a Falls Church City police officer, he's going to be sitting at Eden Center and I guess drinking bubble tea, and you can drink bubble tea too, which is fun. Anyway, so that's on May 1st. I unfortunately I won't be able to go because that's also the Women's History Walk Day, and also be aware that on May 1st it'll be the 2022 Women's History Walk in the City of Falls Church starting at 11 a.m.
Very cool. Yeah, not to promote one particular business, but last time I was in Eden Center, I went into that place that's called TDM or something.
Right.
It was like being in like inside a spaceship or something in there. It was totally not what I was expecting, but it was awesome. So
yeah, it's like a super cool tea shop.
I felt very old in there. I mean, and I'm not that old, but I felt like super old in there. But it was really cool. I mean, I was probably not cool enough to be in there, but good bubble tea and good Vietnamese iced coffee. So yeah, that sounds cool.
Yeah, there's another tea shop called One Tea that's also very cool. But what's neat about them is they have Taiwanese bento boxes, which is very unique. So it's worth it to try all the different tea shops.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you, Ms. Teets. Anything else that anyone would like to add? Any other announcements or planning commissioner reports? Okay, not seeing any.
I just had.
Go ahead, Derek.
The Housing Commission met yesterday, and just one item I thought was important to report back on that. I'm sure a lot of you had heard, and I think we discussed it, that the Fields, which is one of our low-income housing tax credit buildings, affordable buildings in Falls Church, there were a lot of reports that the building wasn't being kept upright, that there was mold and that there was rodent infestation, and there was a lot of pushback by residents there, and they really weren't getting very far with the management company. Then the management company was asked to come to a city council meeting, and there was more testimony there. So I think all this advocacy had an impact, and there was a report that a lot of the issues that were problems and challenges for residents at the Fields have been addressed, and that the management company made a real effort to remediate the mold and to do other repairs that had been undone for quite a while. And I'm not exactly sure, but there was some talk that maybe the person who was on site or the got switched out, or that there was a change in staff at the Fields, and that's what made the difference. But I just feel, and I wanted to report back, that a lot of people mobilized throughout the city to put pressure on the council, and then have the council put pressure on this management company, and it seems to have paid off in that a lot of the issues have been addressed. I'm sure, the building's a little outdated. There will be more issues that will arise, but hopefully the management company will take care of them as things happen. But it's nice to know that there was this advocacy and mobilization, and it seemed to have paid dividends for the residents of the Field. So that's my update.
Great. No, that's an excellent update. We've all been following the story of what was happening there, and I know at times there was some distressing news coming out, but I know council was very concerned about that and was doing everything they could. So it's glad to hear that there was some positive progress was made. Excellent. Okay. If there's nobody else, then I will now throw it back to Mr. Stoddard. Apologies for jumping out of order, but that's what happens when I try to go from memory. So, go ahead, Paul.
No worries. Thank you, Chair Krasner, members of the commission. I'll walk through the written report here, and then I have a couple more recent updates after the packet went to print, as it were. So one is the department budget video is posted, as you all, I'm sure are aware. It's in your rules of procedure to monitor the budget of the planning division. So I'd like to keep you aware of where we are in the budgeting process. I think I presented some materials about our proposed budget several months ago. I wanted to give you the latest. This is the video version of our budget proposal, which is available at that link. For reasons of Microsoft and Word, I couldn't turn that into a hyperlink, so you'll have to copy and paste it. I guess Microsoft and Word and my technical abilities really should be thrown into that mix. In terms of the manager's proposed budget for Cpeds, I can summarize. We did have some partial fulfillment of our requested funding needs. Included in the proposed budget is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Depending on how you count, it's up to 5 staffers, and then more depending on how you count. But it's a new building inspector, a new person at the permit counter, a new planner, a new zoning tech, as well as someone making one of the marketing positions in economic development permanent. So that's 5 new positions there. Also utilizing the building permit fees would be a new IT professional that would be dedicated to supporting public works as well as Cpeds. And then also a new staffer, a new civil engineer in public works dedicated to plan review. So it's depending on how you count, which division you're counting, it's 5 positions or 7 positions. In our unfunded needs, we did call out the need for an additional planner as well as additional building inspector to provide for more resiliency in our staffing plans. You can see more of that in the video link there. Also in the written report is the quarterly report. I'd like to make this public in terms of what the planning division and planning and zoning divisions have delivered over the last quarter, and also what we're planning to work on over the next quarter in terms of milestones we're trying to hit. Also included in that are highlights from the quarter in terms of major projects or major initiatives that are either going to groundbreaking or have hit major milestones, as well as a recap on our budget. We are currently projected to underspend our budget for the current year by a modest amount. That gives us a gentle cushion, at least in terms of our ongoing expenses, things like cell phone fees and salary and benefits. And then we'll be looking to use any remaining one-time funds strategically as we close out the fiscal year. 3 things that are not in the written report. These were sort of breaking items after this went to post. There have been 2 resignations in the planning staff that I wanted to make the Planning Commission aware of. The first is Principal Planner Carly Aubrey has resigned her position with the city. She'll be moving to pursue her passion for environmental planning. She'll be taking a position with Fairfax County. Her last day with the city will be not this Friday, but next Friday, April 29th. And just as a reminder, just to summarize some of her highlights with the city. So Carly's been with the city for just over 6 years, actually almost 7 years, and in her time, she's obviously made a lot of projects that are worthwhile happen. Obviously, I think a lot of people know her as the project manager for West Falls. She's been working on that project for almost 5 years. But in addition to that, she was the lead planner to get the cottage housing ordinance through, as well as the entitlement process for the cottage housing, an award-winning project. She helped update the city streetscape standards when that went through the process. She was at one point, as many people were, a case planner for some portion of Founders Row, some portion of Broad and Washington, as well as she won, I think she went out and won grant awards for urban design studies that supported the work at the West End. So really, she's had her hand in a lot of projects. She used to review grading plans for environmental impacts when she first got started here. So she's excited about the opportunity to get back to environmental planning. It's something she used to do earlier in her career, and she's excited to get back to that. So obviously we wish her well, but of course she'll be missed here in the city. The other resignation...
I had nothing to do with that, Paul, for the record. Nothing to do with that.
The other resignation we've had is Garrison Kitt, senior planner, longtime planner with the city. I think he just notched 11 years of service to the city. He's resigned for personal reasons. But folks, I'm sure, are familiar with his work. He was involved in the small area planning process with the city from the very beginning, going back to the North Washington Street Small Area Plan. He was the primary author, on North Washington, South Washington, Downtown, West Broad Street, all of those. And not only was he the lead author, he was the lead researcher. He did all the mapping for it. He did all the graphics for it. He prepared the materials for it. So really just a tremendous effort to get those going. And that wasn't all he was doing for the city. He was writing grant applications, doing other site research, coming up with renderings, preparing fly-through videos of what the city could look like in the future. I remember his videos actually made Arlington County board members jealous back when there was a joint meeting of the council and the board. I think some of the board members turned to their own staff and said, why can't we have videos that look like that? So that was always good. I think also one of the stories is that Garrison's fly-through for the South Washington corridor was so compelling that I think the developers used it to secure financing for the project. That people didn't know if they wanted to invest $150 million in South Washington Street. And then when they saw Garrison's videos, they said, I get it. I'll give you money and you can build a building there. I see what the city's trying to do. And so his work has obviously been compelling, not just inside the community, but outside as well. So they'll both be obviously missed. And then lastly, just an update. I know Gary Fuller was here running the Planning Commission meeting last time, and that's probably something you'll be seeing a little more of. I think I'm trying to free up some more of my time to be more present with the City Council, especially as West Falls moves through its sort of final phases and other projects are going in front of the City Council, zoning updates, things of that nature. I'll be spending probably more time with the City Council. So you'll see Gary Fuller putting in more time with the Planning Commission. The other things I'll be doing with my Wednesday nights are checking some of the other boards and commissions that are staffed by planning, so I'll be able to make the rounds to the CACT, who I haven't seen in, years, as well as AAB, HARB, Historical Commission, all the groups that are organized or liaisoned by the planning staff. But of course, I'll still be keeping tabs on you all and checking in on a pretty regular basis. I've always valued my time with the commission, and I like the opportunity to interact with you all on a regular basis. But that concludes my report. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Well, we'll miss all of the departing staff, and we'll miss seeing you on a regular basis. Hopefully you'll come once in a while.
Yeah, I'm expecting at least once a quarter, if not more often. And part of this is holding to our staffing rule of no more than one evening meeting in a week. We're finding that does a lot to help protect against burnout, because obviously we can give people comp hours or more time off, but what they really need is time with their families. And so that's how we're trying to play this out, is committing that staff members don't need to go to more than one meeting in a week.
Sure, no, definitely understand that. Mr. Stevens.
Yeah, just a quick question, Paul, on the quarterly report. Lots of good information in there. Under the CIP and grant applications, there's the Virginia Tech Student Studio scheduled to recommend bicycle facilities. It's in the fall, and I was just wondering, as an ex-alum of Virginia Tech, how would we find out information about how to register for that?
Oh gosh, that's an interesting question. So I can tell you the professor that'll be running it is Ralph Bueller, and that'll be up in the Ballston campus that Virginia Tech has. So if you've got Ralph's email, you might be able to reach out to him directly, or otherwise I can put the two of you in touch.
Yeah, that'd be good. I'm sure the city will comp us, won't they, if we want to take that class?
Well, yeah, we can figure out a way to do that.
Great.
I mean, the intention was for the students to advise the commission. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, one thing that, those student studies, we always try to wrap those up with a present to the commission or other relevant groups. But they often ask us for guest speakers to help kick the thing off. if you're interested, I think the students would really benefit from having you there at the, at that kickoff meeting. Usually it's me, but I could just as easily, or maybe better, be a commissioner.
I would defer to you, Paul. But the idea of the class sounds very intriguing. So, and I've heard Ralph Bueller speak before. He's very good.
Excellent. Okay. Well, let's see here. We're getting down towards the. I'm not going to go from memory. I'm going to pull it back up. Okay, it's correspondence. So that's it for Paul's reports. We did have a few items of correspondence to talk about, or at least acknowledge. I guess we missed the dedication of City Hall plaques and the memorial tree, but I'll just say, again, Councilman Z was one of the reasons I got on the Planning Commission. I met him on the BZA. He spent a short period of time on the BZA, but that's how I met him. And when there was an opening on the Planning Commission, he was one of the folks that kind of chatted with me about it. And anyhow, he is sorely missed, and certainly worthy of being honored in that fashion. So that's a great thing. Let's see. The Board of Washington groundbreaking. I think we all got emails about that. That's coming up.
Just a quick comment, Brent, on the dedication and the Dan Z. I actually was there. I was asked to speak at it, and so the mayor, Wyatt Shields, and myself kind of gave little testimonials about Dan, and also the lead certification for the City Hall. So it was I must say, it's a very nice program. The city did a nice job, and it's too bad it wasn't recorded so that more folks could see it. But a lot of heartfelt, good comments about the influence that Councilmember Dan Z had on the city.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. That's great. Okay, the Broad and Washington groundbreaking up.
Okay, I just
Yeah,
want to
jump
add
in.
a +1 to that. I wasn't able to attend, but since this is a public meeting and recorded, I just want to just say how much Dan Z meant to me and how sad I wasn't able to join, but he's also a key reason I'm here and have a role in the city. So I miss him greatly.
Yeah, I think that's a common sentiment for sure. Okay. Someone else raising their hand? Nope. So Broad and Washington groundbreaking, which is next week on next Friday, well, a week from this Friday, so the 29th, which sounds pretty cool, actually. I haven't made it to a lot of groundbreakings, but I may try to make it to this one because, it's at Clarendon Down, so that's kind of cool. And this is definitely a cool project that our group here certainly had a role in. So it's nice sometimes if at least one or two commissioners can attend these things. Not let city council take all the credit, and play around with the shovels in the dirt. So anyhow,
You're worth going to. I have a really great shovel that's spray painted gold from a groundbreaking that I still use all the time to garden with. So you never know what you might get.
exactly those things are cool. Those gold shovels, that's one of the few perks of the job here. So very cool. So that's coming up. Inside Properties email. Let's see. I have to admit I don't know. Oh, was this from a citizen, Mr. Stoddard?
Yeah, so it was outreach from a resident at Falls Green, flagging some concerns and the back and forth.
Right. Yeah, I think that was forwarded. They might have been forwarded to me as the chair directly at some point. It sounded like a lot of it was, again, like a landlord-tenant type of issue. I wasn't sure if there was much of a city role in that or a planning commission role, so I wasn't quite sure, if there was anything, specifically for us, but it seemed like it was, to the extent there is, maybe council's a more appropriate body to hear any concerns, but I think it was just being sent to various folks in the city, but we'll acknowledge that we did receive it and read it. From Ms. Roth. Okay, the last item of correspondence is for Arbor Day, which is coming up on April 23rd. So that's Saturday at Jesse Zachary Preschool from noon to 1 to plant a tree, right? Or plant a 2022 tree by the Urban Forestry Commission. Cool. So Arbor Day is cool, and that's on a Saturday. And I guess if folks want to stop by that sounds like a neat thing with our city arborist. Cool. So that's all our correspondence. If there's not any other comments or final parting words, I guess, Paul, our next meeting is on May the 4th.
Correct, and the expected item on your agenda is a review of and I apologize for not going over this in the director's report. The one item in your agenda currently is your review of as a work session, your review of the senior housing building for the West End Economic Development site.
Cool.
Where it's tentatively, it's scheduled for consideration for council to refer it out next Monday, the 25th.
All right, very good. Okay, so I guess that's all there is. Then we'll see everybody in 2 weeks, and we'll call tonight's meeting adjourned as of 9:09. All right, thanks everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks. Good night,
Good night.
everybody.
Thanks.